My name is Marla Dawson. I'm 54 years old, and I fix other people's torn clothes for a living. 17 years ago, I found a 6-year-old girl begging outside a Walmart in the December cold. I named her Emma. I raised her on needle and thread, sewing until 3 in the morning to pay her tuition. Last Saturday, she graduated top of her class, and a Ferrari pulled up to the lawn. A billionaire stepped out, wrapped my daughter in her arms in front of every camera, and called me the kind woman who watched my child for me. She handed Emma car keys, an apartment, and a folded contract. All I had was a 17-year-old security tape and an old man's memory. By the end of that party, everyone would learn who really abandoned that little girl in the snow. By the end of that party, everyone would learn who really abandoned that little girl in the snow. The grass had that just-cut smell, sharp and green, and the folding chairs were still warm from 3 hours of June sun. I was standing at the edge of the crowd, the way I always stood at the edge of things when I heard the engine. It didn't sound like anything else on that lawn.
Low.
Expensive. It rolled up along the access road behind the stage, red as a wound, and 200 phones turned toward it before the door even opened. A woman stepped out. Cream dress, gold at her wrists, sunglasses pushed up into hair that had clearly never seen a box of drugstore dye. She moved across the grass like the grass owed her something, and she went straight for my daughter. "Emma," she said, and her voice cracked on the single syllable, practiced enough to sound unpracticed. "Emma, my God, look at you." Emma froze in her cap and gown, diploma tube still in her hand.
I'm sorry, doi.
"You don't know me yet." The woman was already crying, already pulling Emma into her arms, chin hooked over my daughter's shoulder so the cameras behind her got a clean shot of her face. "But I've looked for you every single day for 17 years. I didn't move. I told myself I didn't move because I didn't want to make a scene. The truth is I couldn't. My legs had gone somewhere without me." "My name is Vivian Ashford," she said, loud enough now for the rows behind us to hear, loud enough for the boy filming on his phone 3 feet from me to catch every word. "I am this girl's mother." The applause started before anyone even knew what they were clapping for. Nobody asked a single question. They just clapped. Emma's eyes found mine over Vivian's shoulder.
Wide.
Asking me something I didn't have an answer for yet. Vivian pulled back, held Emma's face in both hands, and that's when she turned, slow, deliberate, like she'd rehearsed the angle, and found me standing there in the blue dress I'd hemmed myself the night before, the one with the loose thread at the hip I hadn't had time to fix. "And this," Vivian said, reaching one manicured hand toward me like she was presenting me at an auction. "This is the kind woman who watched my child for me. Watched my child for me." I stood there and let the words land, and behind my ribs something folded shut like a drawer. "I'm sorry," I said, before I could stop myself. "Did you say watched?" Vivian turned to me with a smile made for cameras. "You have no idea what this means to me. To finally thank the person who I raised her." My voice came out quieter than I meant it to, but it carried. A few heads turned. "For 17 years. I raised her." "Of course you did," Vivian said smoothly, already reaching for Emma's hand again, already turning her body half a degree back toward the phones. "And I will never, ever be able to repay that." Somebody near me said, "Oh, that's beautiful," to the woman standing next to her, and I wanted to ask her, "Beautiful how?" But my throat had closed up somewhere around my collarbone. Emma's diploma tube slid out of her hand and hit the grass. Nobody but me seemed to notice. I looked down at the dress I was wearing. I'd cut the pattern myself off a picture Emma had shown me from a magazine 3 weeks of evenings after closing the shop, because I wanted her to see me looking like I belonged at her graduation. Standing next to Vivian Ashford's tailored cream silk, my dress looked like exactly what it was. Homemade. Careful.
Small.
A man's voice cut through the crowd. Deep, unsteady. "Vivian?" An older man in a gray suit was pushing toward the stage, his face pale under his tan. "Vivian, is this her? Is this really her?" "Gerald." Vivian's hand found his arm, and for 1 second, just one, I saw something flicker behind her eyes before the tears came back on cue. Gerald, this is our daughter.
Our.
I watched the word do something to the man's face, undo something, and I thought, he believes her. Whatever this is, he believes every word. Then Vivian leaned in close to Emma's ear. I watched her lips move. I couldn't hear a word of it. The sound guy had a microphone somewhere, and the crowd was still buzzing, but I saw Emma's face change. I saw her go very still, the way she used to go still as a little girl right before she asked me a question she was afraid of the answer to. Vivian pressed something into Emma's hand. A cream envelope, thick, the kind of paper that costs more than the letter inside it has any right to. Emma's fingers closed around it, and I saw her hand shake, just once, just barely, before she tucked it against her gown and looked up to find me again in the crowd.
You smiled ahead. I don't know how.
But I smiled, because that's what you do when your daughter is looking for you, and you are the only solid thing left standing on that lawn. I saw her before I saw anything else. A small shape by the cart corral, knees pulled to her chest, no coat, just a thin sweater with a cartoon bear on it, the kind you'd find on a clearance rack. Her lips were the color of the sky right before it snows. People walked past her. A man in a Carhartt jacket. 2 teenagers laughing at something on a phone. A woman pushing a cart with a rotisserie chicken balanced on top. Nobody stopped. I want to be honest about that because it matters later. Nobody stopped. I crouched down in front of her. My knees cracked. Sweetheart, I said. Where's your mom? She didn't answer. She just looked at me with eyes that had already learned not to expect anything from a question like that. Are you cold? I asked, which was a stupid question because her whole body was shaking, but sometimes you ask stupid questions because the real ones are too big to say out loud in a parking lot. I took off my coat and put it around her shoulders. It swallowed her whole.
She let me.
That was the part that undid me. She let a stranger wrap her in a coat without a single word, like she'd stopped believing strangers were dangerous or safe, just whether to get through. Inside, under the fluorescent lights, I bought a hot chocolate from the machine by the pharmacy and knelt down again while she drank it with both hands wrapped around the cup like it was the only warm thing in the world. A store manager called the police. We waited by customer service for 40 minutes. That's when the security guard came over. Heavy-set man, maybe 50 then, badge that said Sutton. He crouched down the way I had, looked at her, and something crossed his face I didn't understand at the time. He didn't say much. He just stood near us until the cruiser pulled up outside. The officer took a report, said they'd check missing persons, check the area, see if anyone came looking. I gave my name, my address, told them I'd keep her overnight since it was so late and the shelter didn't take children alone. Someone will call in the morning, the officer said. Someone always does. Nobody called in the morning. Nobody called in a week. A caseworker named Diane came by twice, then less, then not at all. She had 40 other files stacked on 40 other desks, and mine was the one that had a working stove and a warm bed and no bruises to worry about, so mine went to the bottom of the pile. 9 months later, I was sitting in a family court in Columbus signing adoption papers, my hand shaking so bad the notary asked if I needed water, and a judge with kind eyes made her legally what I'd already been calling her in my head for months.
Emma.
I open a loop here I couldn't close for 17 years. Not one person ever came asking after that little girl. Not a flyer, not a phone call, not a knock on my door. I used to lie awake wondering what kind of mother loses a child, and never once looks. The years after weren't easy, and I won't pretend they were. I took in alterations until midnight most nights, 100 wedding dresses and prom gowns and men's suits that needed taking in at the waist. My fingers pricked so many times, I stopped noticing the blood on the thread. Some months I ate crackers with butter for dinner so Emma could have the real food. Why do we always eat crackers on Thursdays? She asked me once, maybe 8 years old, swinging her legs under the kitchen table. Because crackers are my favorite, I told her, and she believed me because she was 8 and because I was good at lying about the things that scared me. I taught her to read using scraps of fabric. I'd write words in fabric marker, cat, dog, home, and pin them to the wall above her bed like a quilt of letters. She grew up sharp as a tack. Straight A's every year. A scholarship to law school that covered most of it, and I covered the rest with money I'd been folding into a coffee can under the sewing table since she was 8 years old. I never told her about that can until the day I handed it to her. All $6,340 of it, still smelling like coffee grounds. "Mom," she'd said, holding the can like it might break. "This is everything. It was always going to be yours," I told her. I just held on to it for a while. I used to wonder about her mother.
Who she was.
What kind of woman walks away from a 6-year-old in 9-degree weather and never looks back? I pictured someone desperate, someone broken, someone I might even have forgiven if I ever met her. I did not picture a Ferrari. Standing on that lawn last Saturday, watching Emma clutch an envelope with trembling hands and Vivian Ashford's perfume drifting toward me like something sweet gone wrong, a memory came loose that I hadn't touched in years. It rose up whole, the way a name does right before you say it out loud. That night at the Walmart, the cruiser pulling in, its lights washing red and blue across the ice. And beside me, close enough that I felt his breath in the cold, the security guard, the heavy-set man with the badge, leaning down and muttering, almost to himself, like he wasn't sure he should say it at all. I saw the car that left her. I had let it go 17 years ago. An old man's tired eyes, I'd told myself, playing tricks on a cold night. I never even wrote his name down. But standing on that lawn, with Vivian Ashford's diamond earrings catching the sun and my daughter's hands shaking around an envelope worth more than I'd earned in a decade, that forgotten name came back to me all at once, sharp as a needle through cloth. Sutton. Ray Sutton. The name settled between us like something I'd swallowed. Ray Sutton. I hadn't said it out loud in 17 years, and now here it was on my tongue, at my daughter's graduation, while a woman in a $5,000 dress smiled for phone cameras 20 feet away. I didn't have time to think about what it meant. Vivian was already walking back toward us, heels sinking slightly into the grass, and she was talking before she reached us.
Marla. Emma.
"I've booked a suite at the Ritz downtown. Just for tonight, so we can actually talk. Not out here, with everyone watching." She said everyone watching, like it embarrassed her, though she was the one who'd driven a Ferrari onto a college lawn. 3 hours later, we were sitting on a cream sofa that cost more than my truck, in a room on the 14th floor with a view of the river. Emma still had her cap in her lap. She hadn't taken off her gown. Dana Reyes poured sparkling water into 3 glasses and set them down without asking if we wanted any. She was maybe 35, dressed in the kind of black blazer that doesn't wrinkle, and she smiled at Emma the way people smile at cameras. "Emma, honey, I know this is a lot," Dana said. "But what Vivian is offering you is the kind of thing most people spend their whole lives hoping for." Vivian set a leather folder on the glass coffee table. It made a soft, heavy sound, like it was thicker than paper should be. "The Sherborne apartment on 5th, she said, opening it. 2 bedrooms, river view, already furnished. The car, obviously, you saw that. And a seat on the board of the Ashford Family Foundation, with a trust that activates the day you turn 23. She turned the folder toward Emma. $187,000 a year, for life, on top of the principal. I watched Emma's eyes move across the page. She didn't touch it. "That's very generous," Emma said carefully. Her voice was the one she used in mock trial, flat and controlled. "It's not generosity," Vivian said. "It's restitution. 17 years, Emma. 17 years I've grieved you." I sat with my hands folded in my lap and said nothing, because I had learned a long time ago that in rooms like this, the woman in the thrift store cardigan is not expected to speak. "There is one thing," Dana said, gently, the way a nurse tells you the needle will pinch. "For the Foundation's spring charity campaign, we need a story. A clean one. Vivian's team has been building a narrative around reunion, a mother who lost her daughter, searched for years, and finally—" "I didn't lose her," Emma said. Not loud, just clear. Dana kept smiling. "The language matters less than the feeling behind it, sweetheart. What we need from you, publicly, is a statement that you were separated from your birth mother as an infant, lost or taken, and that Marla—" Dana glanced at me for the first time, briefly, like checking a fact against a spreadsheet. "Found you and cared for you until Vivian could locate you again." I understood the sentence 3 separate times before it finished landing. Found me, Emma repeated slowly. A woman who took in a lost child, Vivian said. Reaching over to touch Emma's knee like this was tenderness. That's a beautiful story, Marla. You should be proud of it. Nobody is erasing what you did. Nobody is erasing what you did. She said it while handing my daughter a document that erased it entirely. I thought about the sewing machine with the sticky bobbin case I never got fixed because $40 mattered that year. I thought about $6,340 and a coffee can becoming Emma's tuition deposit. I thought about 100 nights hemming other people's prom dresses so my daughter could have new sneakers in September.
Found.
Like she was an umbrella left on a bus. I need some time, Emma said, closing the folder herself before anyone else could reach for it. Her hands were steady. I noticed that because mine weren't. Vivian's smile didn't move, but something behind it did. A small adjustment, like a thermostat clicking. Of course. Take a few days. But Emma, she leaned forward, her voice dropping into something almost kind, almost a mother's voice. If you didn't know better, don't let sentiment get in the way of your future. Marla would want that for you too. Wouldn't you, Marla? She didn't wait for my answer. She never had. In the truck, on the highway back toward the shop, streetlights sliding orange across the windshield, Emma finally broke. Not loud. Just tears, steady down her face, her jaw locked tight the way it got when she was trying very hard not to be the kind of person who cried. It's not the money, she said, when I reached over and she let me take her hand. It's that she said it like you were nobody. Like 17 years was just babysitting. I didn't have an answer for that. I still don't some days. Her phone buzzed on the seat between us. She turned it face up, and I watched the light of the screen catch the wet on her cheek before she read it. Sign before Friday, or the offer disappears, and you and your mother will learn the cost of choosing wrong. Emma set the phone down, screen still glowing, and stared straight ahead at the road. The phone buzzed once more in Emma's lap, but she didn't look at it. I drove the rest of the way home with both hands on the wheel and my eyes on the yellow line, and neither of us said a word until I pulled into the gravel behind the shop. Inside, I flipped on the lamp over the cutting table. The bolts of fabric stood where I'd left them that morning. A navy wool, a bridal satin someone would pick up Tuesday, a remnant of the same blue cotton I'd used for Emma's church dress the year she turned 9. Emma sat down on the stool by the machine, the one with the wobbly leg I never fixed, and pulled her knees up like she used to when she was small enough to fit in the corner of it. Say it, I told her. Whatever it is, say it out here where I can hear you. She looked at the bolt of blue cotton for a long moment before she looked at me. Part of me wanted to sign it, Mom. Her voice came out flat, like she'd rehearsed it in the car and hated the sound of it either way. Not the car. Not even the money. She looked at me tonight like I already belonged to something bigger than this shop. And for about 10 seconds, I wanted to belong to that. I didn't flinch. I picked up a spool of thread and started winding it back onto the card, just to have something in my hands. Then take it, I said. What? Take the deal, Emma. The apartment, the money, the seat on her board. You say the words she wants you to say. It costs you nothing real. My fingers kept moving on the thread. I'll go back to being the woman who found you at Walmart. That's fine. I was that woman before I was anything else to you. The stool scraped hard against the floor when she stood up. Don't do that. Her voice cracked upward, sharper than I'd ever heard it aimed at me. Don't you dare make yourself small, so I don't have to feel guilty. I'm not. 17 years, and the first time something costs you, you volunteer to disappear. She was crying now, angry crying, the kind that comes out like heat instead of water. You've been doing that my whole life. Skipping meals so I wouldn't see the grocery bill. Telling me the coat was extra fabric you had lying around when I know you cut into your own coat to make it. You are always the one who steps back. I am so tired of watching you step back. I set the spool down. Outside, a car passed on the road, and its headlights swept the ceiling and were gone. I don't know what else to offer you, I said quietly. I don't have a Ferrari. I don't want a Ferrari. Emma wiped her face with the heel of her hand, furious at her own tears. I want to know why she left me on a sidewalk in December and never once looked back. Everybody keeps telling me who I could become if I just sign my name. Nobody's telling me the truth about who left me there in the first place. She sat back down, and this time when she looked at me, something in her face had changed, the wet anger drying into something harder, more decided. I'm not signing anything, she said. Not Friday. Not ever, until I know why. We didn't sleep that night. Around midnight, I pulled the cardboard box down from the closet shelf, the one marked EMA, docs in my own handwriting from 9 months after I found her, the day we'd driven to the family court in Columbus to make it legal. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor with a folder in her lap, reading through pages she'd never asked to see before, the intake form, the caseworker's notes, the judge's signature. Marysville PD, she read aloud, tracing a stamped line near the bottom. Report filed by responding officer, cross-reference to a call placed by store security. She flipped the page, frowning. There's a note here, half of it smudged. She held it under the lamp. Security employee reported vehicle activity prior to discovery. See attached statement. She looked up. Mom, there's no attached statement. It's not in here. My chest went tight in a way I didn't have a name for, and didn't try to find one. There was a guard that night, I said slowly, the memory surfacing whole, like it had been waiting 17 years for permission. Older man. Gray jacket. Radio on his hip. He was the one who called it in before I even got you inside. Do you remember his name? I closed my eyes and there it was, plain as the cold that night. Ray Sutton. Emma was already typing before I finished saying it, her thumb moving fast over the phone. A minute later, she turned the screen toward me. A public record search. 3 men named Ray Sutton in the state of Ohio, one of them 81, one of them deceased 2 years back, and one of them 68 years old, address listed in a small town 40 minutes north.
Call him, I said. Now.
Before we lose our nerve. Emma dialed with the phone on speaker, her hand shaking slightly against the tabletop. It rang 4 times. Then 5. On the 6th, something picked up, not a greeting, just breathing, slow and labored, like each one cost something. Mr. Sutton? Emma said. My name is Emma Dawson. I think you found me once. Walmart, Route 9, 17 years ago. A long silence stretched out, filled only with that ragged breathing. I waited 17 years for this call. The voice finally said, thin and cracked. But I don't know if I've got enough left in me to make it in time. The line went quiet except for a rasping breath, then a woman's voice cut in. This is Diane. That's my father. He wants to see you, but I need to know why first. I kept it plain. Emma, the Walmart parking lot, 17 years ago, a woman named Vivian Ashford. Diane exhaled long and slow. Come tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. He doesn't have a lot of good hours in a day anymore. The house sat at the end of a gravel road outside Marysville, a single-story ranch with a wheelchair ramp bolted crooked to the porch. A tank of oxygen stood by the door like a third person waiting to be let in. Diane met us before we reached the steps, scrubs still on from a night shift, eyes rimmed with tired. He gets excited, his numbers drop, she said. 10 minutes. Maybe 15 if he's having a good day. I nodded and reached for Emma's hand without meaning to. She let me take it. Ray Sutton was smaller than I'd pictured, folded into a recliner with a cannula looped under his nose, the tube hissing faintly with each breath. His eyes, though, were sharp. They moved to Emma and stayed there. You were the little one, he said. Not a question. I don't remember you, Emma said. I don't remember much of that night at all. No reason you should. He shifted, wincing. You were half frozen. 6 years old, no coat that fit, sitting on the curb by the cart corral like you were waiting for a bus that wasn't coming. His hand trembled toward the oxygen line, adjusting it out of old habit. I was doing my walkthrough. Saw a car stop at the far end of the lot, past the cart return, engine running. Woman got out, walked you to the curb, said something I couldn't hear and got back in. What kind of car? I asked.
Sedan. Dark.
Not a work car, one of those cars that costs more than my house did. He looked at Emma again. She didn't look back. Not once. Pulled out before you'd even sat all the way down. The room held still except for the tank's small mechanical breath. I watched Emma's hands go flat on her knees, pressing down like she needed the floor to stay put, and I had to stop myself from pulling her into my arms right there in front of a stranger's oxygen tank. I started toward my truck, Ray said. Was going to follow her, get a plate at least. My shift lead grabbed my arm. Said company policy. We don't leave the property. We don't get involved in what's a police matter. Corporate would have our jobs. His jaw worked. I let him grab my arm. That's the part one never got past. I let him. You called it in, I said quietly. The police came. I remember that part. I remember the officer's shoes were wet. I called it in. Then I stood by my truck in the cold for 20 minutes waiting for a cruiser, watching that little one shiver by the register lights, thinking I should have just run out there anyway, and to hell with the write-up. He looked toward the window, toward nothing in particular. I've had 17 years to turn that 20 minutes into a religion. Every version where I go faster. None of them are true. I stood there. You didn't do anything wrong, Emma said low. I did the thing that kept my paycheck safe, Ray said. That's not nothing. That's a choice. Diane appeared in the doorway with a look that meant time was closing in, but Ray waved her off with 2 fingers, and I found myself holding my breath the way I imagine he was holding his. There's more, he said. Before Walmart tore out the old system, must have been 3 years after that night, a tech came through swapping every camera in the store for digital. I was still working the door then. I asked him what happens to the old tapes, and he said they get wiped and reused or thrown out. He stopped to breathe, the sound wet and effortful, and I watched Emma lean forward an inch without seeming to know she'd done it. I kept a copy, VHS, off the security room deck. Told myself it was in case that little girl ever came looking and needed to know her mother didn't die trying to get her back. Told myself a lot of things. Where is it now? I asked, leaning forward before I could stop myself. Ray's brow furrowed, and for a moment the sharpness in his eyes clouded into something older and slower. That's the trouble. I've moved 3 times since Diane's mother passed. Storage unit, then here, then he shook his head. The deck to play it broke years ago anyway. I don't even know if I'd recognize the box now. Might be in the garage. Might be gone. I felt Emma's shoulders drop beside me, and I felt the same drop hollow out my own chest. A witness with no proof was just a sick old man's word against a billionaire's lawyers, and I knew exactly how that math worked out for people like us. We'll find it, Emma said, more to herself than to him. Ray's hand found the edge of the blanket and gripped it, and I watched his eyes narrow the way a man's do when a locked drawer somewhere in his memory finally gives. Wait. He looked up sharply, his gaze skipping past me straight to Emma. I remember now. I sent a copy. Not the only one, a second one. That woman had a lawyer handling paperwork right after. Some man in a suit came by the store asking questions about that morning, and I gave him a copy because he said it was for the child's file. His eyes fixed on Emma, and his voice, thin as it was, didn't waver. She signed something at that courthouse. I remember him saying that. She signed something. The courthouse air smelled like floor wax and old paper. I stood by the metal detector, my library bag still on my shoulder, and watched Emma talk her way past the front counter, like she'd done it 100 times. Records request, she said. Adoption and Family Court, Franklin County, 2009. The clerk, a woman with reading glasses pushed up into gray hair, barely looked up. Sealed records need a court order, hon. I know. Emma slid a folder across the counter. But voluntary relinquishment filings from that year aren't sealed the same way if the petitioner's name is a matter of public record in a separate proceeding. There's a statute. I can pull the citation if you want it. The clerk looked up then. Really looked. You a paralegal? Law school. 3 weeks out. Emma didn't smile. She'd been rehearsing this in the car the whole ride down, muttering case names under her breath like a prayer. I hadn't asked her to do this part. I hadn't known she could. We waited on a bench outside records processing, and that's when I heard it. 2 clerks by the coffee machine, one balancing a stack of blue folders on her hip. That Ashford thing from this morning, the courier rush, the first one said. $90 for same-day copies, can you believe that? Rich people always in a hurry, the second one said. Whole family's been in the system since the 90s, different names though. Ashford's the married name. Emma's hand found my arm. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I felt my pulse in my throat. A folder came out 40 minutes later. Thin, 3 pages, older paper gone soft at the corners. The clerk set it on the counter between us like it was nothing, like it hadn't taken 17 years to reach my hands. Emma read it first, because her eyes moved faster than mine. I watched her face instead of the page. I watched her go still. Mom. Her voice cracked on the word. She turned the folder around. Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights. Petitioner, Vivian Claire Ashford, formerly Vivian Claire Hallam, born Cleveland, Ohio. Filed voluntarily. Notarized. Witnessed. Not lost. Not stolen. Not a mother who'd spent 17 years searching for a daughter torn from her arms.
Signed.
In her own hand, that same looping V I'd seen on the contract in the Ritz suite 3 days ago. She wrote it down, Emma said. She wrote down that nobody took me. I put my finger on the date at the top of the page. December 19th. 2 days after the night, I found her outside the Walmart on Route 9. 2 days. She had time to come back, I said. My voice came out flat, like I was reading a grocery list. She had 2 days, and she used them to find a notary instead. Emma didn't cry. She laughed once, short and wrong, the kind of laugh that isn't about anything funny. I have a copy of her signature. In a legal document. I could hold this up in a room full of reporters, and there's nothing she could say to unwrite it. I looked at my daughter, whatever paper said otherwise, and saw something new in her face. Not hurt. Calculation. The same look she'd worn over her torts textbook every night for 3 years, except now the case was hers. Copy it, I said. Copy it twice. One for us, one somewhere she'll never think to look. The clerk ran the copies while Emma paced by the window, phone pressed to her ear, calling a classmate who clerked for a family court judge. Just tell me if voluntary relinquishment paperwork can be entered as evidence in a civil suit for emotional distress, she said. Hypothetically. She wasn't asking hypothetically. I knew that voice. We were still standing at the counter when Emma's phone buzzed in her bag. She didn't check it. She was folding the papers into a manila envelope, careful, like they might bruise. My own phone rang 40 minutes later, in the parking garage, right after Ray's voice came through tinny and out of breath. Found it, he said. Box in my daughter's garage, marked Christmas decorations, if you can believe that. Tape's warped some, but it's there. I need somebody who still owns a VCR. You watched it? Not yet. My hands were shaking too much to load the machine. A cough rattled through the line. Wet and long. Marla, I need to do this right. One chance at this tape, I figure. We'll find a VCR, I said. Emma's already texting somebody. Emma was pulling up her law school directory on her phone, hunting for anyone in the AV club. I was still holding the courthouse envelope against my chest like it could stop something from getting in. That's when I noticed the car. Black sedan, tinted windows, parked across the garage exit, engine running though nobody sat outside it smoking or waiting on a friend. It had been behind us on the way in. I hadn't thought about it then. I thought about it now. Emma. I nodded toward it without pointing. She looked once, quick, then looked away like she hadn't. Stairs, she said. Not the elevator. We took the stairwell 2 floors down, our footsteps loud against the concrete, the envelope crushed between my arm and my ribs. At the bottom, through the chain-link fence, I could still see the sedan hadn't moved. Her phone lit up before we reached the door.
Donna Reyes.
Emma showed me the screen without answering it. A text sitting under the missed call. We need to talk before you do something you can't undo. Alone.
Today.
The morning coffee sat untouched between us. My hands wrapped around the mug just for something warm to hold. Emma's phone buzzed on the kitchen table. A text from Dana Reyes. Need to see you alone. Not about the contract. 9 a.m., the diner on Route 9. Come without your mother. Without your mother. Emma read it aloud flat. That's not an invitation. That's a warning label. Then don't go. I'm going. She was already reaching for her keys. I went anyway and sat 2 booths back with a newspaper I didn't read. Dana showed up 11 minutes late, sunglasses on indoors, a manila envelope pressed flat against her chest like she was hiding a bruise. She slid into the booth across from Emma and didn't order coffee. She knows, Dana said.
No greeting.
About the courthouse. About Ray Sutton. She had someone follow you from Columbus. Emma kept her voice level. Who's someone? Doesn't matter. What matters is what's in your mailbox by tomorrow. Dana pushed the envelope 2 inches across the table, then stopped, like she couldn't finish the gesture. Her lawyers drafted a letter. Kidnapping of a minor.
Fraud.
They're saying the adoption paperwork from 17 years ago has a hole in it. No police report filed within the mandated window. No state notification. They can make it look like your mother took you and never told anyone who should have been told. I read the words on the page through the booth window's reflection and felt the mug I wasn't holding get very cold in my chest. That's not what happened, Emma said. I know that. You know that. It doesn't matter what's true. It matters what's filed. Dana finally took off the sunglasses. Her eyes were tired in a way that didn't match her blazer. There's something else. Ray Sutton's in the hospital. Marysville General. Collapsed at home last night. His oxygen tank ran empty. His daughter found him on the kitchen floor. Emma's fork clattered against the plate she hadn't touched either. And a man went to his daughter's house yesterday afternoon. Dana went on. Offered her money for any old recordings the family might want to preserve. $90, same-day courier, to get the tape shipped somewhere fast. She said no. For now. I found Ray's name in my mouth before I found the rest of the sentence. Is he stable? That's all I know. We drove to the hospital instead of home. Ray was propped up in a bed too big for him, an oxygen line under his nose, his daughter Diane asleep in the chair beside him. He opened his eyes when Emma took his hand. Tape's safe, he rasped. Told Diane. Don't give it. Not for $90. Not for $90,000. We won't, Emma said. In the hallway, I finally said what I'd been holding since the diner. Maybe you should sign it, honey. Emma turned like I'd slapped her. I mean it. The lawsuit. She'll bury us in paper we can't afford to fight. Ray's in a hospital bed. What if this isn't a fight we win by being right? What if it's a fight we lose slow, one bill at a time? So, we let her rewrite it. Let her tell the world you found a lost puppy on Route 9. I've survived being erased before, I said. I can survive it again. I don't know if I can survive watching this cost you everything. Emma didn't answer that. She stared at the vending machine down the hall like it owed her something, then said, quiet. She's not scared of the truth, Mom. That's what I got wrong. She's scared of who says it first. If she gets there first, the truth doesn't matter anymore. It just becomes a rumor about her instead of a headline. My phone was dead in my purse. Hers wasn't. It buzzed once, then again an email, not a text from an address with no name attached, just numbers. Emma opened it standing right there in the hallway, under the fluorescent lights, with Ray's monitor beeping steady behind the door. It's from Dana, she said. She says she recorded it herself. Says she's done being anyone's cover story. She hit play. The audio is tinny, hotel room acoustics, ice clinking somewhere in the background. And then Vivian's voice, clear as the day she'd stepped out of that Ferrari. Pay the girl whatever costs. I don't care about the number. I just need her to say I was robbed of my child, that I was the one who lost her. My husband can never know she was born out of wedlock. Emma's thumb hovered over the phone, the recording still playing, Vivian's voice looping past the word hers one more time before Emma finally pressed pause. I set the phone down on my nightstand and looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. 2 days until the party. My hands were still shaking a little, not from anger exactly, more like something had finally gone still inside me after weeks of churning. I picked up the phone again and forwarded the file to Emma with 3 words, call me now. She called in under a minute. I heard it, she said. Her voice was flat, careful, the way she talked when she was holding something together with both hands. I heard all of it, Mom. Emma? I'm going to the party, she said. I'm going to smile. I'm going to say thank you for the dress and the car, and I'm going to sign whatever they put in front of me at the table right there in front of everyone. I sat down on the edge of my bed. You are not signing that contract. I'm going to pretend to, she said. There's a difference. The next 2 days moved fast in a way that made the ground under me feel unsteady. Dana called Emma from a number that wasn't her office line, whispering half of it, telling her the venue was the Ashford estate on Larkspur Hill, telling her there'd be a screen set up behind the head table for a slideshow. Vivian wanted photos, home videos she'd apparently commissioned some editor to build out of nothing, a childhood that never happened. I run the AV, Dana said. I can load whatever file I want onto that system an hour before doors open and nobody checks it twice. Ray called Thursday afternoon, and I almost didn't recognize his voice at first, thin as paper. I'm coming, he said, before I'd even asked. Ray, you were in the hospital 3 days ago. I know where I was. A pause, breath rattling somewhere behind his words. My daughter's driving me. I told her if she doesn't, I'll call a cab with what's left of my lungs. You don't owe us this. I owe that girl 17 years, he said. Let me pay one night of it. The tape had already been digitized. His daughter had walked it into a transfer shop in Dublin, Ohio, and paid $90 in cash for a same-day rush, and by Wednesday night the file sat on a thumb drive in Emma's jewelry box, wedged behind a bracelet she never wore. Friday evening, I stood in my sewing room with Emma's graduation dress draped over my knees, the hem gone soft and a little frayed at one seam where she'd caught it on a chair leg at the ceremony. I'd made that dress on my singer over 6 nights back in the spring, and now I was patching it again like it mattered, like a torn hem was the thing that needed fixing about tonight. Emma stood in the doorway watching me work the needle. You don't have to sew, Mom. I have a closet full of things from her now. I know what you have. I didn't look up. I want you wearing this one. She crossed the room and knelt down next to my chair, put her hand flat over mine so the needle stopped. I'm not trading you for any of it. Not the car, not the money, not the name on some building. Her eyes were dry, steady in a way that made my throat go tight. I need you to actually believe that before we walk in there tonight. I finished the last stitch instead of answering right away, because answering would have undone me. Then I bit the thread and held the dress up.
There.
Good as new. The Ashford estate sat behind iron gates on Larkspur Hill, and when our car came up the long drive, I could see string lights threaded through the oak trees, a white tent big enough to hold 200 people, a step-and-repeat banner already lit up for photographs. Cameras clustered near the entrance, local news vans parked along the circle drive. Someone had printed Emma's face on a banner beside Vivian's. The words "A Family Restored" arched above both of them in gold script. Vivian found us near the entrance, radiant in ivory, her hand already reaching for Emma's arm to steer her toward the photographers. There she is, she said, loud enough for the nearest camera. My girl. Gerald appeared at her side a moment later, tall and silver-haired, offering his hand to Emma with the easy warmth of a man who believed every word he was about to say. Emma, he said, taking both her hands in his. I'm so glad you're here tonight. I want you to know. He glanced at Vivian, something tender passing between them. I'm so sorry for the years you were kidnapped from us. The stage lights came up behind him, flooding the tent in white, and I watched my daughter's face hold perfectly still. The room did not move, but Gerald's chair scraped back against the marble, a sound like a fingernail dragged across a chalkboard, and everyone turned to look at him instead of at me. He did not sit back down. Vivian, he said. What is he sorry for that you haven't told me yet? Dana, standing near the AV table with a lanyard around her neck, went very still. I had learned by then that Dana went still right before she moved.
Vivienne recovered fast.
She always did. She put a hand on Gerald's arm, laughed the laugh she used for cameras, and turned to the crowd like a hostess smoothing over a spilled glass of wine. He's overwhelmed, she said. We all are. Emma, sweetheart, come up. Tell them what tonight means to you. I felt Marla's hand find mine under the tablecloth. She did not squeeze it. She just held it the way she used to hold it crossing a parking lot when I was small enough to need that. I stood up. The tent had 200 folding chairs in it, white linen on every table, A jazz trio that had gone quiet somewhere around Gerald's question and never started again. I walked to the small stage where Vivian stood in a cream dress that cost more than the rent on our shop for a year, and I did not take the microphone she was holding out to me. I set the Ferrari key on the podium instead. It made almost no sound, just a soft click of metal on wood, but somehow that click carried further than anything a microphone could have done. Then I set the contract next to it and signed. Every page still there, the pen Vivian's lawyer had clipped to the folder still capped. Emma. Vivian's smile did not move, but her eyes did. What is this?
This is me answering, I said.
I had rehearsed almost nothing. Ray had told me once, in his living room with the oxygen line hissing at his nose, that the truth doesn't need rehearsing, it just needs a place to stand. So I gave it a place to stand. I took my phone out of the small clutch Marla had sewn a hidden pocket into for exactly this, and I set it against the podium mic. The audio was 11 seconds long. Vivian's voice, recorded 3 weeks earlier in a suite at the Ritz downtown, came out of the speakers clean and unmistakable. I'm not asking you to lie, Emma. I'm asking you to let me finish a story I started 17 years ago. Sign it, and none of this ever has to be about a girl on the side of a road. A woman near the front, press credentials swinging from her neck, actually gasped. I watched the sound travel backward through the tent like a wave hitting a seawall, table by table, faces turning toward Vivian. That is edited, Vivian said. Her voice had climbed half an octave. That is completely out of context. There's 40 more minutes if you want context, I said. I hadn't told even Marla I had the full file, only the clip. I watched her glance at me, surprised, and something passed between us that had no name yet. I nodded toward the screen behind the stage, the one Dana had rigged that afternoon, disguised as part of the graduation slideshow loop. Dana pressed a key on her laptop from the AV table, not looking at Vivian, not looking at anyone. The screen filled with grainy black and white. A timestamp in the corner. December 19th, 17 years ago, 6:47 p.m. A parking lot. Snow coming down sideways in the wind. A silver sedan pulled up along the curb by the cart corral, engine running, exhaust curling white behind it. A door opened. A woman got out, walked around to the passenger side, and lifted a small child down onto the pavement. She crouched for 2 seconds, not to hug her, I understood now, but to say something, one sentence, close to the little girl's ear. Then she stood, got back in the car, and drove away. The child stood alone by the carts for 11 seconds before she sat down on the curb, knees pulled to her chest, and did not cry. Nobody in that tent breathed. It's her. Ray's voice cracked out from the third row, and I realized he'd said it wrong in his shock, then caught himself, correcting into English with effort, oxygen tube trembling at his nose as he pushed himself up out of his chair with both hands on the table edge. It's her. I watched her do it through the window of my booth, and I didn't run out fast enough. I've carried that for 17 years, and I am done carrying it alone. Marla had told me once that guilt is just love with nowhere to go. I understood, watching Ray stand there shaking, exactly what she meant. Dana stepped forward next, into the light, her voice steady in a way it hadn't been in the parking garage 3 weeks earlier. I was told to get her to sign by Friday, she said. I was told what to say if she asked questions, what to imply about her mother if she stalled. I have the text. I have the call log. I was hired to build you a fairy tale, and I'm done building it. Vivian's mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again. You're twisting a mother's love into something ugly I gave up everything to protect. You signed a voluntary termination, I said. 2 days after that video. December 21st. I have the certified copy from the Columbus Family Court, with your signature and Gerald's father's lawyer as witness. Nobody took me from you, Vivian. You put me down on a curb in 9-degree weather, and you drove away, and a Walmart security guard sat with me in his booth until child services came because you couldn't be bothered to. Someone near the back said, quietly but not quietly enough, "Keep my child's safety, please." The phrase Vivian had used in the press release 8 weeks ago, "Watch my daughter for me," as if 17 years of Marla's life had been a favor called in. It moved through the crowd like the punchline of a joke no one wanted to laugh at. The silence after that had a texture to it, thick and complete, the kind of silence I imagine exists right before something breaks. Vivian turned on me, the cream dress catching the stage lights, her composure gone somewhere she couldn't reach anymore. "I gave you an empire," she said, her voice cracking down the middle. "A car, an apartment, a name. I gave you everything." I picked the microphone up off the podium for the first time all night. "An empire," I said, "doesn't buy 17 years of nights." The room stayed silent. Somewhere near the bar, a champagne flute clinked against a tray, and nobody moved to catch it. "It doesn't buy the winter she went without heat, so I could have it," I said. "It doesn't buy every dress I let out an inch because there wasn't money for a new one. You didn't lose a daughter, Vivian. You dropped one off. There's a difference, and everyone in this room just watched it." I set the microphone down on the podium. Then I walked. Past the ice sculpture melting into its silver tray, past Dana with her arms crossed and her chin up, past a table of donors who had gone very still, very interested in their napkins. Marla stood near the terrace doors where she'd been all night, half in shadow, like she still hadn't decided she was allowed to take up space in this house. I took her hand. Her fingers were rough, needle-pricked cold. "This is my mother," I said, loud enough to reach the back of the room. "She didn't just watch me for you. She raised me." Somewhere a phone shutter clicked. Then another. Then a dozen, a sound like rain starting. Gerald hadn't sat back down. He was still standing where he'd risen 10 minutes earlier, one hand braced on the table, and now he turned to Vivian with a stillness that was worse than shouting. "1990, he said. "The Foundation Gala in Naples. You told me you couldn't have children. I built the wing at St. Agnes in your name because of that story." His voice cracked once, then flattened out cold. "How long were you going to let me believe it, Gerald?" "How long, Vivian?" She didn't answer. She looked instead at the recording still frozen on the projector screen behind her, her own younger face, caught mid-turn, walking back to a car and never looking back. Nobody in that room needed her to answer. A man in a gray suit stood up near the front, the kind of standing that means a decision has already been made. "Bill Okafor Family Trust," he said, to no one and everyone. "We committed $400,000 to the spring campaign. That commitment is withdrawn as of tonight." He didn't wait for a response. He gathered his wife's coat and walked out, and that seemed to break something loose in the room, because two more donors stood within the minute, phones already at their ears. A reporter near the back, I'd clocked her earlier, notepad instead of a phone, actually listening instead of filming, said, "Just loud enough, Mrs. Ashford, was foundation money used to fund tonight's event?" Vivian didn't look at her. That was its own kind of answer. I picked the contract up off the table where I'd left it an hour ago, the one with my name typed at the bottom and a blank line waiting for my signature. I tore it once, then again, the paper thick enough that it took real effort, and set the pieces down next to the Ferrari key. "I don't want the apartment," I said. "I don't want the money. I definitely don't want the car." Dana crossed the room then, in front of everyone, and stood beside me instead of behind Vivian where her badge said she belonged. "For the record," she said, to the reporter with the notepad, "I was instructed to draft language calling Mrs. Dawson an unfit guardian." I refused. "I have the emails." She looked at me. "Thank you for not making me the villain in this." "Thank you for the file," I said. It was the only thanks she needed. Near the wall, Ray had lowered himself back into his chair, oxygen tank hissing soft beside him, and there was something on his face I hadn't seen the whole time I'd known him. Not relief exactly. Quiet. Like a debt he'd been carrying for 17 years had finally been marked paid. He caught my eye and gave one small nod, and I understood it wasn't for me. It was for the version of him that stood in that Walmart parking lot in December, watched a stranger walk away from a 6-year-old, and let his manager's voice win instead of his own. "I kept the copy," he said, quiet just to me. $90, same-day courier. Back when I couldn't afford my own gas that month. Figured someday it'd matter more than the gas did. "It did," I said. Two men in dark suits, Ashford Group security, I'd learn later, moved toward Vivian, not to protect her from us. To get her out of the room before the story got worse. She let them, which told me everything about what she thought was coming next. Lawyers, reporters, maybe worse, given what Dana's emails would show about where foundation money had actually gone. Somebody near the door was already asking whether the family court filing from her adoption case would need to be reopened, and I filed that question away for tomorrow, not tonight. Marla hadn't said a word through any of it. Outside, past the terrace doors, the valet lights were still strung up along the driveway, gold and useless now. "Let's go home," she said. We walked out together, past the Ritz doorman who didn't quite know where to look, down the wide stone steps toward the street where our car, a 14-year-old Corolla, parked crooked between a Bentley and a limousine, waited under a street lamp. Marla stopped halfway down and pulled off her heels, one and then the other, holding them by the straps in one hand like she used to after long shifts at the shop. "My feet have had enough for one night," she said and laughed, and it was the first real laugh I'd heard from her since we walked in. "Let's go home to the shop, Mom," I said. Behind us, under the porte-cochere lights, the Ferrari still sat exactly where I'd left the key, untouched, ignored, already looking like somebody else's problem. A valet hovered near it, unsure whether to move it or wait for instructions nobody was going to give him. The reporter with the notepad caught up to us on the sidewalk, out of breath, pen already moving. "Miss Dawson, one more question," she said. "If Vivian Ashford offers you anything again, the money, the apartment, any of it, what do you tell her?" I opened my mouth to answer. I told her the truth. There's nothing left to offer. Emma nodded slowly, like she'd been waiting to hear me say it out loud. She didn't answer the reporter's question. She just took my arm, and we walked past the cameras, past the valet still holding the Ferrari's other key, past Gerald standing alone on the steps with his phone in his hand. 3 weeks later, the tape sat on the counter of my shop in a padded envelope, the return address a hospice in Marysville. The bell over the door rang the way it always had, a small brass thing I'd bought at a flea market in 2009, and Emma came in carrying a framed diploma. She set it down next to the register, careful with the glass, and looked at the wall above my sewing machine, the one with the faded floral wallpaper and the calendar from the fabric supplier that was 2 years out of date. "Right here," she said, tapping the space, "where you can see it from the machine. You want your law degree hanging over a singer from 1998. I want it hanging where you work." She said it simply, no argument in it, and pulled a hammer and a nail from her bag, like she'd planned this for days. She probably had. I held the frame level while she drove the nail in. The sound of it, 3 sharp taps against old plaster, filled the shop the way it used to fill with nothing but the hum of the machine and the radio Ray Sutton once told us he listened to on his lunch breaks at the Walmart on Route 9. "I'm going to open an office," Emma said, stepping back to check the frame was straight. "Not big. Just me, maybe one paralegal. For kids like—" She stopped herself, the word she almost used still sitting in the air between us. "For kids who get left somewhere. Abandonment cases. Custody records nobody bothers to unseal." "Where?" "Above the shop, if you'll let me use the back stairs." She glanced at me sideways. "Rent-free, obviously. I'm still your daughter." I didn't trust my voice for that one, so I just turned back to the fabric on the table, a bridesmaid dress somebody needed taken in by Thursday, and let my hands do what they knew how to do. The pins went in one at a time along the waist seam, the same rhythm I'd been keeping since before Emma could walk, and for a while that was the only sound in the room. "Mom." She came and sat on the stool across from me, the same stool she'd sat on as a 6-year-old with a scrap of muslin and a marker, tracing her letters because we couldn't afford workbooks that year. I found the original order slip from the alteration shop where you bought remnants for my clothes when I was little. The lady who ran it kept records for 30 years. She slid a photocopy across the table. "You wrote daughter's Easter dress on the ticket. 6 months after you took me in, before anything was legal." I looked at the slip and didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything that needed saying. I'd known what she was to me before any court had. The envelope from the hospice sat unopened on the counter for 2 days before I finally slid it with the seam ripper I keep by the register. Inside was the original VHS tape, Not the digital copy Dana had helped clean up, not the courtroom exhibit that had already been logged and duplicated a dozen times by then. The real one. Ray's handwriting was on a strip of masking tape across the top. Emma, December 19th. Underneath it, a note, block letters, the kind of handwriting that comes from hands that don't hold a pen much anymore. I didn't get there fast enough that night. This is the only thing I could do instead. I'm sorry it took 17 years. His daughter called the shop that same afternoon. He passed Tuesday morning, she said. Oxygen turned down low. The fishing show on low too. He made me promise to mail that before I called anybody. Wanted it out of the house before he was. He didn't have to do that, I told her. He said he did. A pause on the line. He talked about your girl more than he talked about his own grandkids toward the end. Said she was the one thing he got right by accident. Emma took the tape from me without a word and turned it over twice in her hands, like she was weighing it. He gets a case named after him, she said finally. The clinic. The Sutton Fund, for legal fees. She didn't ask if that was all right. She'd already decided. She put the tape in the drawer under the register, the one where I kept spare buttons and the shop's expired insurance certificate, and closed it gently, like she was tucking someone in. The first letter from Vivian came in April, forwarded through Emma's old campus mailbox. 3 pages, expensive stationery, a return address in a part of Columbus I'd never had reason to drive through. She wrote about therapy, about Gerald moving out, about a version of herself she said she was trying to become. Emma read it once at my kitchen table, then folded it back into its envelope and didn't answer. The second letter came in June. Shorter. It didn't mention therapy. It mentioned a documentary crew that wanted to speak with Emma about her mother's redemption story and how it might help everyone move forward, and how Emma's participation could be worth quite a lot if she was interested. That's the difference, Emma said, sliding it across the counter to me like evidence in a case she'd already won. One of those is a woman trying to fix something. The other is a woman trying to get something back. She wrote back to neither. She put both letters in a folder marked Ashford, closed it, and carried it upstairs to the office she was still building out of shelving lumber and a filing cabinet she'd bought secondhand. That evening, after she'd gone up to measure the room for shelving, I sat at the machine with the bridesmaid dress under the needle and finished the seam. I snipped the thread, smoothed the fabric flat, and hung it on the rack by the window where it caught the last of the light. Love was never the expensive thing in this story. It was the cheap thing, the thing that cost almost nothing and took almost everything: worn-out soles on winter boots, half a sandwich given away without ever mentioning it, a scrap of muslin, and a marker on an overturned bucket. A Ferrari can buy a lot of things. It has never once bought a mother. I turned off the lamp above the machine, the same one I'd sewn under for 17 years, still lighting the same small room, and went to lock the front door for the night. If you've ever built something out of almost nothing and had someone try to buy it out from under you, you already know the ending to this story before I say it. Some things were never for sale. Tell me in the comments what you would have done with the keys.